If everyone could just find their seats, we'll get started in a second. Thank you all so much for joining us at the fourth iteration of the Future of Sustainable Investing Conference. My name is Isabella McDonald, and I'm one of the co-presidents of FSICON, alongside Karan and Zoe, who you'll hear more from later. On behalf of the whole team, I'm so excited to welcome you all today as we bring together professionals, students, academics, policymakers, and more to discuss mobilizing the capital markets for sustainable development. FSICON was established in 2019 by a group of Brown undergraduate students who had a vision of creating a forum for discussion between students and professionals on what the future of sustainable investing and business more broadly should look like. The world of business and politics is changing, and what this conference aims to do is capture that change and channel it into something strategic and something that endows every student with the knowledge and connections to create change in the world. Since FSICON's founding, the future of sustainable investing and the sustainable investing space have grown and evolved in parallel. Sustainable investing has moved into public view as Canada requires banks to disclose their climate-related risks, as the SEC implements plans to enhance and standardize climate-related disclosures for investors, and as Janet Yellen warns of cascading climate risk to the financial system. In response, climate capital has poured into ESG funds in recent years. By the start of 2020, ESG financial assets totaled about $1 trillion. This grew to $2 trillion in 2021. The downside of this progress, however, is that the heightened public awareness of integrating sustainability into our capital markets has led to some backlash against these very practices. This is precisely why we're here today. The progress made in this space is evidenced by this pushback we are increasingly experiencing. As students about to enter the workforce, we believe it is vital to ensure that this momentum is not lost. Our generation is going to make pivotal decisions, financially and politically, and our goal is to engage with and challenge these future leaders, to embolden them to reimagine the way we are creating and, perhaps more importantly, designing the future of investing. This would all not be possible without the hard work of our 25 undergraduate students who have dedicated an immense amount of time and effort to put this conference together for you. We also extend our gratitude to our corporate sponsors, our silver tier sponsor, Fidelity Investments, and our bronze tier sponsor, Bain & Company. Our advisory board, comprised of Brown professors, has been invaluable in organizing today's programming. Additionally, we extend our thanks to our Brown partners, the Nelson Center for Entrepreneurship, Career Lab, and the Watson Institute for International and Public Affairs. Finally, we would like to acknowledge the Institute at Brown for Environment and Society and their incredible team for their generous support in the form of time, resources, and consultation. You've all made this conference possible, and we couldn't be more excited for what today has in store. On behalf of the entire FSICON team, we are so lucky that speakers of such accomplishment and stature would be generous enough to travel to Brown and share their expertise and experience. Your willingness to impart knowledge to the students you'll be speaking to today is admirable. Thank you for your time, wisdom, and enthusiasm. We couldn't be more honored to have you. I'd now like to invite Kim Cobb to say a few words. Kim is the director of the Institute at Brown for Environment in Society, a professor, an award-winning climate scientist, lead author for the IPCC 6th Assessment Report, and has recently been appointed to Biden's Intelligence Advisory Board. She has worked tirelessly to advance the Institute's commitment to studying the interactions between natural, human, and social systems, and preparing future leaders to envision and build a just and sustainable world. Kim, thank you for all your support.
Thanks so much. It's just such an honor to be here today and to be learning and sharing with this amazing community. And I just want to take one more minute to give a round of applause for these amazing students who year in, year out through the pandemic have lifted this event up for all of us. Thank you so much. In fact, I've been in this position 6 months at Brown, so I'm still getting acclimated, but this event was put on my radar in my first couple weeks at Brown as one of the most iconic and standing events at Brown in the area of sustainability. And so I was thinking through this whole process about how lucky we are to be working closely with the students and in this sustained event and to be hosting this year in, year out. And I thought, IBIS should be a major part of this, and we should be contributing to its development over the years, not just as an annual event, but thinking about how we can support this work going forward in our curriculum and in the research ecosystem that we are building here at Brown, and thinking about what's possible in the space of climate solutions. So on Wednesday, to that end, we just launched our new strategic plan for the Institute at Brown for Environment and Society, and I just wanted to say that there is a component in that plan, largely because of this event, that helps us recognize the student demand for these kinds of opportunities and how we could begin to help develop students into the many different kinds of careers and professional opportunities that they want and will have going forward in this space. So we will be building out a curriculum in sustainable financing and investing, and I want to recognize Ricardo Bayen, who's been a champion in IBIS for this work. Thank you, Ricardo. So you can go check out our strategic plan at ibis.brown.edu. We'd love to be continually involved with everybody who's here in building out that ecosystem for the curriculum and thinking about what it means for our research programming and what it means for the kinds of partnerships that we want to anchor at Brown in thinking about what this could become in the next 5 years. So with that, I just want to hand it back over to Zoe, and she will be introducing our keynote speaker.
Thank you, Kim. As Isabella briefly mentioned, my name is Zoe Kemper, and I am a co-president of FSICON this year. I'm incredibly excited to be moderating this keynote speech with Jochen Wermuth. I will let Jochen further introduce himself when he comes on stage here, but to briefly acquaint you all, Jochen Wermuth is a climate impact investor based in Berlin, Germany. He is the founder and chief investment officer of Wermuth Asset Management, a German family office and investment advisory firm committed to sustainable investments. He is dedicated to positively impacting climate by overseeing the investments of his family wealth across all asset classes, third-party funds via the Green Growth Funds, and Germany's sovereign wealth funds. Furthermore, he has helped to build the Divest Invest movement with commitments of over 30 trillion from asset owners to divest from fossil fuels and into climate solutions. He has been a member of the Global Impact Investing Network, GIN, the Family Office Network, Tonic's 100%ers, and the Institutional Investor Group on Climate Change, IGCC. He has served on the World Economic Forum's Global Growth Company Advisory Board and has been chair of Young President Organization Gold Berlin. Jochen, we would love to introduce you to come up. Jochen, again, thank you so much for joining us today. To further this introduction, we would love to learn more about your career trajectory, and we also know you're a fellow Brunonian. As you said, you taught ballroom dancing in this exact room. Could you tell us about your background, your path from Brown to Wermuth Asset Management, and your role at Wermuth Asset Management?
Thank you. Well, first of all, indeed, this was where I taught ballroom dancing. So I left foot, the other left foot, and it's very, very nice to be back. How did it start? Someone asked me earlier, why did I get interested in environmental issues? And it started with the Chernobyl event is it Echo, I think, yeah? Where the Chernobyl cloud stopped at the River Rhine where I lived, stopped in Hyphens. The government decided that on one side of the river, you could play in the sand pit and you could play in the grass as a little girl, as a little boy, or with your mother, most of the time, at the time. And as a result, the friends of my family on one side of the river ended up a few years later with lots of cases of cancer, and the other side, none, or almost none. And when a friend close to me suffered from this illness and asked my mother for euthanasia, helping to die because it was so painful, I decided I was going to do something about it and started demonstrating against stupid environmental policies, but I kept getting carried away. So I thought I'd do something that I call doing a Bloomberg, that is become a billionaire and do good things with the money you made. So that was the idea. And I just decided to stop going to school in Germany. I left school without finishing high school because Brown was kind enough to accept me before finishing high school. At Brown, I was told that a bachelor in here only counts as much as a high school diploma in Germany, so I tried to do a bachelor and a master. So I did a math bachelor and an economics bachelor and a bachelor and a master's in economics. And yeah, I had amazing teachers that encouraged me to follow my dreams, and I've done that. And I don't know, all the way to Wermuth. That's a long story. But I then went on to go to Oxford University to do my doctorate, and from there was invited to advise Boris Yeltsin, who was at the time trying to build a free democracy and a free market in Russia. And that did go well for a few years. It's now, of course, one of the biggest disasters in history, what's going on in Ukraine and because of the Russian aggression. And as I was working on trying to build a Europe from Kamchatka to Tenerife, I noted that investments were very important, and that's also the case today for climate. And so I finally ended up building Deutsche Bank in Eastern Europe, and I was very lucky that I had a professor called Merlis who got the Nobel Prize for Incentive Theory, and he had told me that you should always try to find situations where people don't believe what you believe, but you're really convinced you can do it. And so what I agreed is, at the age of 27, that I would get a third of the profits that I generate for Deutsche Bank. They thought I'd maybe make 100,000, get a 30,000 bonus. As it turned out, there were about 8 billion in euro bonds we raised in 9 months. Commissions were 2%. The bank earned 160 million, and I was supposed to be paid 53 million. But as it happens, they forgot to pay me. So, and then happily, a very smart law firm, Mishcon de Rea in London, decided to take up the case. No big law firms want to help me. And fortunately, I've had some very good friends who said, actually, he did do the business, he should be paid. And so the 140 people and I that had built this business were finally able to reach an amicable settlement, which meant that I was ready to retire. And so I retired rather early, and then met a Nobel Prize winner who said, you've done physics in Germany, then math, economics, you know, finance. You could bring Burger King to Moscow or Burger King to Warsaw, or you could do something meaningful with your life. There are 2 billion people who don't have clean water to wash their children, who don't have light at night to read and educate their children, women who are cooking most of the time, women unfortunately, over wooden stoves or char stoves, inhaling 40 packs of cigarettes equivalent. And let's do something for them. Let's bring solar power down by factor 10 so we can wake up in an amazing new world. And I'm very happy that today, 23 years later, I think we're very, very close to waking up in this amazing new world where, through decentralized, cheap, renewable energy, we will have a world where never mind where you're born in the world, you have a chance to get a good education, to have clean water, to have heating, cooling, access to internet. And yeah, and that's about to happen. So the world is wonderful, I think.
Yeah, thank you for that. I hope to follow in your footsteps as also an applied math and economics major.
Very good.
So we just have a few questions that we would love to ask you just before we dive into the structure of the conference. As a big overview, how would you say investing can be made sustainable? It's a tough question, but what do you think the biggest challenges and opportunities to solving climate degradation are across the globe, if you had to pinpoint a few?
All right. So my first thing is, of course, that the wonderful thing about America, you invented the idea of feathering and tarring people, right? So feather and tar people that really are real crooks. That's a wonderful institution we're missing completely in Germany. So I recently got national TV to come to me and say, what do you think of this Allianz investment management product called coal-free funds? I said, that's fantastic, a coal-free fund, you know, Fridays for futures and grandmas for futures and scientists for futures, and the inhabitants of threatened areas by coal companies all bought this pension fund called Coal Free Fund. Then they showed me the portfolio and what's the biggest position, It's RWE, which is the biggest coal company in all of Europe. And I said, well, they asked me, can that be in this portfolio? I said, no, you must be smoking pot or something. Can't possibly be true. So they go back to Allianz and ask them, this is going to be on national TV tomorrow, please explain why your coal-free fund has the biggest coal company in it. And they say, quite easy. You have to make a decision reasonably between a company that used to be coal that's transitioning to fully renewable, and we chose the limit of less than 30% from coal, right? That allows you to be called a non-coal company. They came back to me and said, what do you think of that definition? And I said, oh, that's nice. That's like you sell me alcohol-free beer, that's 30% vol, that's more like vodka, right? Or you sell me a PG-0 movie, that's 30% porn, right? So it's just not okay, right? And unfortunately, that is the current situation. We have lots of people. That reminds me to one of my first days at Brown when I explained that my mother was a PhD in statistics from Harvard and had 4 boys and worked all the time. And in Germany, it's very rare to have women work so hard. And this frat guy looks at me, yeah, feminism, that's a good one. Chicks dig it. We want to get laid. So actually, no. So that's a bit how ESG works today. The environmentally social governments, chicks dig it. So what you do is you pretend to do good. You try to be nice and actually do all sort of horrible things. The worst one of it is called best-in-class ESG. That's like you choose the worst companies in the world, right? And of them, the best. That's like going to, what's the name of the prison here again? I haven't been there, unfortunately, but there's a prison nearby. Let's say it's
Here?
Yeah, that's called the New Bedford prison. You go to New Bedford prison, and you go to the serial killers ward, and you say, who's the nicest guy this week? He gets out on the weekend. That's best-in-class investing. It's absolutely criminal, right? Because if you have a company that causes damages to society, that pollutes the environment, that gives you cancer through emissions of fossil fuels, you can't possibly be buying this stuff, right? It's not good enough to be the nicest of the serial killers. You should still stay in prison, or rather you should be out of the portfolio. And one of the reasons I've ended up where I ended up in life is that here at Brown University, a very courageous decision was taken at the time of the Live Aid concerts about apartheid South Africa. Desmond Tutu actually came here and congratulated us at the time because he said Live Aid concerts were nice, but what freed Nelson Mandela and what was for the human rights in Africa was when Brown University and others decided to divest from any company doing business with South Africa at the time. And that was 70% of the index. Imagine I give you the task to have a financial portfolio where you leave out 70% of the index, and still you did that because Brown felt that was the right thing to do. And that made me very, very proud. And because of that connection, later on in life, when I built the Global Divest Invest movement, Desmond Tutu agreed to be our sponsor, to speak in front of the United Nations and say, climate change is the human rights issue of our time. We in the North, the 1% that causes 99% of the emissions, will be hardly hurt, but people in the South will be hurt a lot. And therefore, I don't know how I got to my point in life here. What do I think about ESG and impact? So ESG is nice to have, it's necessary. So I'm one of the first signatories of the PRI, or the Principles of Responsible Investment, and environmental social governance standards are absolutely necessary. It's not nice to be, a vice fund purposely doing evil. But it is necessary but not sufficient. Sufficient is impact investing. And there's a big confusion about impact investing. Many people think impact investing has something to do with charity, but it doesn't. It consists of 2 words, impact and investing. You mean, of course, not negative impact. I don't mean to be slaughtering everybody in a local high school. I mean to get you off weapons, right? So that's a positive impact. And similarly, on the investment, you want to have positive return. So if you have 4 quadrants, one up is higher return, to the right you have impact. The top right quadrant is impact investing, where you have a positive return and a positive impact. The bottom right quadrant is philanthropy. You agree to give up your money, but you have positive impact. And then you have on the top left, you have vice funds, people who specifically invest in human rights violating activities like tobacco or whatever else it is. Vice funds actually exist. They think they make more money. I'm very proud to say today that I think the future of finance is no longer risk and return, but is risk, return, and impact. It will make absolutely no sense to anybody looking at this century and the past century, to even fathom that we could possibly consider a company to have an annual account signed off without showing what your impact is. It's just as crazy as pre the 1930s financial crisis. We didn't have international financial accounting standards, and anybody could make up their numbers. I'm profitable when someone else doing the same business would come up with a negative result. It is completely senseless to have annual accounts signed off where one company destroys the environment, destroys the local community, abuses the rights of the community, has the same profit as another company. So risk, return, and impact, I'm sure, is the new normal. Sir Ronald Cohen, who leads the G20 Impact Investing Task Force, is sure it'll be 1 or 2 years away. I believe makes common sense. In my first economics lesson, right behind this wall there, Professor Cora told us that, of course, externalities matter, right? If you have people who can consume water and other things without paying for it, those consume too much. So a lot of potential in our investment community. 140 trillion have committed to PRI, but unfortunately they're not doing enough. We need to move much more capital to impact.
I completely agree. And on what you were saying about risk, return, and impact and moving that capital into that right areas, we've discussed how there are 3 areas that you see where we need to focus on to drive that impact. And you've spoken of investment, policy, and increasing public engagement. So let's hone into the first area there, investment. What do you see as the areas of growth, opportunity, and challenges in sustainable investing in Europe to get those, to get that impact that you were just discussing made possible?
Yeah. I think that the first thing that you guys should keep in mind is that unfortunately, or fortunately for you, or fortunately for me, 99.99% of human beings always follow trends and they extrapolate trends into the future. And what we're about to see in the world is what I call a green industrial revolution. The reason, by the way, I'm speaking English to you is why? Why am I speaking English to you? Anybody? Because the English had what? They were the first with the access to the cheapest form of energy, which was the steam engine. That's why I speak English to you. They built the British Empire. Then, as happens when you're leading a global empire, you forget about what's happening. So by 1900, the Russians and the Americans had discovered crude oil, combustion engines, and they were starting the second industrial revolutions, and the Brits kept on building steam engine warships until 1930, which is why the British Empire slowly disappeared. In the second industrial revolution, there's a beautiful case study for what will happen in your career in the next 10 years. Between 1900 and 1914, every single member of the first Dow Jones index, which was a Dow Jones Transportation Index, disappeared within just 10 years because the industry completely changed. And the Rockefellers and JP Morgans and the new superstars of the second industrial revolution, they weren't even in the index. They were all venture opportunities. They were new private ventures. And so the second industrial, now we have a third industrial revolution where the cheapest form of energy is renewables. And most people haven't understood it. It is absolutely stunning that that hasn't happened. And I had recently a marketing course, and the guy said, when you want to talk to someone who could possibly give you money, you should never say, when he says something, or she should say no. You shouldn't say yes and, you should say yes but only yes and. So I was giving a speech at Super Return Berlin. It used to be the case for a decade that there was always 15 people in the room. I always started with a great quote that a small group of dedicated people can change the course of the world. If you don't believe it, that's wrong. It's actually the only way that ever has changed the world. So 15 people in a room. Now a new room, 5,000 people. Everybody wanted to hear about impact investing. And next to me is Steve Schwartzman of Blackstone. And I said, renewables are so much cheaper than fossil fuels. At 2 cents per kilowatt hour, oil can compete at $4 per barrel, and the price of oil was 100. So it makes absolutely no sense to invest in fossil fuel exploration and so forth. And he said, yes, Jan Mang, but you know as well as I do, it takes more energy to make a solar panel than it ever delivers. So here was, hold on a second, it takes more money to make a solar panel than it ever delivers. And I said, no, but I couldn't want to say no, I was going polite. Yes, but, couldn't say that. I said, yes, and that was probably true in 1969, right? In 1969 it was, but today it's completely changed. There's absolutely no reason anybody in their right mind would drive a combustion engine car or buy a diesel or anything like that. It's going to be dead within a very, very short period of time. So far we've been thinking about climate change as this huge challenge, like Sisyphus pushing up a rock up the mountain. We all have to work very hard, and life is depressing, and energy prices are high, and there's a recession, and there's war, and everything's horrible. In fact, that's all behind us. We're now at the top of the mountain. There's a big boulder, and Pippi Langstrumpf, just to give it a little tip, it'll roll down, driven by more market forces, into this wonderful world where everybody has freedom to act. And all these people who are saying, do fossil fuels, drive combustion engine cars, electric batteries in cars don't last, there's no lithium, all this nonsense, which has been paid for by the fossil fuel industries, is going to be proven wrong. Just like the doctors came out on TV and said, smoking is healthy for you, today the fossil fuel industry is pumping you full of nonsense, which means... So how to change it? It's going to happen anyway, but if we want to survive as a species, as the IPCC tells us, we have to act much faster. So while I'm happy as a hedge fund manager or happy as a venture manager that I'll make a lot of money, it doesn't really make any sense if we're going to be dead very soon. So Johan Rockström told us 2 days ago that our chance of survival, if we go to climate neutral by 2050, is about 50%. Flip a coin. 2030, in 7 years' time, we have a 2/3 chance of staying within planetary boundaries. So we must act very fast. And the actions we need to do is one that's been proposed by Al Gore, I think in 1993, which is a carbon tax and dividend. You tax carbon, for example, at 200 euros a ton, and you take the money 100% into the hands of citizens. Each of you gets every month $200 cash, never mind if you're a baby or an old lady. And with this money in hand, you can either pay the higher bills on fossil fuel and beef, or you switch to renewable energy or vegan diet, or you take a bike and you don't take the private jet, but you take a train or the Hyperloop, whatever you want. So carbon tax and dividend is needed. Secondly, tar and feather all the liars from Allianz and elsewhere. And thirdly, I forget, but yeah, I think international standards and impact has to be included in the accounting standards.
Yeah, I entirely agree. That honestly leads into the next point of policy. So, no, that's perfect. What you were just saying is, there's been a lot of debate, especially in the US news right now, about the role that policy can play in creating these subsidies or helping to mobilize the markets for sustainable development. How do you see the role of, how effective is policy in mobilizing our capital markets for sustainable growth? What part can it play? What part should it play? And what responsibilities does it have? All types of policies, standard regulations. This can take the form of taxes, cap and trade. What do you think, standards for disclosure, what do you think are the most important steps? If you were speaking to a room of policymakers, what would you ask them for, and what would you say is imperative that they need?
Yeah, what I find amazing is just like in church, when you finish, you should say amen, right? And when you enter any room, to any human being should say, I wish you carbon tax and dividend, right? That's like, I mean, it's like, hey Joe, carbon tax and dividend. And it's unbelievable. You have, in the German government, for example, they sponsor, I think, 200 NGOs and research tanks, and nobody ever tells them they need a carbon tax and dividend. There's a beautiful initiative here in the US. It's called www.econstatement.org, signed by, I think, 28 US Nobel Prize winners, 15 heads of the US Treasury, 2,000 US economists, and they all say the obvious, you need a carbon tax and dividend. I think that's the most important. And I have thought about this a little bit, but it appears there could be a deal with the devil, if you like, a Faustian deal, where the Republican-led Congress may agree to a carbon tax and dividend, which was in fact proposed by Greg Mankiw, the god of microeconomics and former head of the Harvard Department of Economics and advisor to Bush, so conservative, on condition that one would waive the liabilities of the fossil fuel companies, right? The fossil fuel companies have been knowing for 30, 40 years that they're killing humanity and causing us cancer and climate change. Waive that liability, and in return, we get a carbon tax and dividend in the US. We're working on a carbon tax and dividend in Europe, on a carbon border adjustment mechanism. I think that's the most important thing to move forward, to move more capital even quicker than we need, as quickly as we need it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I completely agree. Could you talk a little bit about your involvement in German politics and in progressing these standards through, these policies through German markets?
Yeah, so initially I was, let's say, just an investor, and I started out with the same dilemma many people have and had and didn't notice. So I had committed to donate 1% of my income to Greenpeace when I met a nice person on the street in Oxford. And then I made a lot of money and became one of the biggest donors of Greenpeace. But at the same time, I was investing in oil and gas and coal companies, right? So by 2011, Charlie Kleisner, who was an Austrian Californian, came to me and said, Jochen, I don't know if you notice anything. On the one hand, you're doing good with donating money to Greenpeace. On the other hand, the much more powerful hand, you're destroying the planet with your investments. And my wife then took me to the north of Russia. And in the north of Russia, there was a river which is actually 5 times bigger than the River Rhine that the Chernobyl cloud stopped over. And that whole river was covered in crude oil, because the way Russia works is they only count the oil that arrives in Moscow, basically, and on the way, there's oil spills all the way, and they're frozen in the winter, and then May comes, and they flow into the river. And I was invited to dig it up together with this Greenpeace mission, and after about half an hour, I threw up, because, in case you haven't noticed, inhaling petrol is very unhealthy, gives you cancer. So then we went to the cancer hospital rate much higher, and I looked at the embryo collection and have a two-headed baby in mind today still, and I decided, wow, actually me making $1 by investing in an oil company, or me saving a pence on my petrol bill while I'm causing two-headed babies and 10 times more cancer rates, really isn't okay. So for moral reasons, I decided I'm going to get together with Ellen Dorsey, who's a big leader of this divestment movement, and we built the global divestment movement to say, for moral reasons, as Desmond Tutu said, we should get out of fossil fuels into renewables and climate solutions. Then what happened is I mentioned the DEWA power plant, Dubai Electricity and Water Authority, and they produced just before COP 2015 the result of 2 cents per kilowatt hour, equal to $4 per barrel. When that came through, we had already the Rockefeller family, Leonardo DiCaprio, Germany's Brenningmeier, Sainsbury's from the UK, all supporting it before Paris. We thought, how are we going to get commitments from 50 billion to, we said, 150 billion. That was an aggressive target. But when over the winter, this data came out that it made economic sense to divest. There's a huge risk, as Yellen said, to keep on investing in fossil fuels. All of a sudden, that story drove us to 3,600 billion commitments by Paris, and 30,000 billion or 30 trillion today. So there's a huge interest, there's a wave of money looking to divest and to invest in climate solutions. The problem is there are very few projects because lots of stupid local regulation is trying to stop it, but happily market forces will mean that if in America you're going to continue to drive big fuel gasoline cars, you're going to be an irrelevant nation that used to be important a few years ago, like the British Empire, really cute, but you can have someone write a autobiography you can write or something, but no. So carbon tax and dividend, number one, and then secondly, the American government with the Inflation Reduction Act has basically guaranteed free hydrogen for 20 years, free renewable power for 20 years. So that's a big move, it's very successful, and hopefully that's a big chance for America if you keep that, stay on track.
Yeah, I completely agree. And so given that you play a role as both an investor and you also understand policy and have worked in progressing that, how would you say, have you seen clients and other managers of investment funds respond to new policies in Europe regarding disclosure of ESG and sustainable investing? How did you respond, or how did the people you know?
Yeah, so people, I think now increasingly are following ESG principles on paper and trying to be impact investors less so, but I think we're now moving to a situation where everybody is accepting it, and I think I decided for myself that I needed to influence policy because policy is so important and it hasn't happened yet. So I started to support political parties and political campaigns. We're currently active. On the 26th of March, there will be a campaign to vote whether Berlin will be climate neutral by 2030. The idea being if the city of Berlin votes to be climate neutral, then Germany, the European Union, and the world could copy that and be climate neutral by 2030. So we get a 2/3 chance of survival, which would be cool, I thought.
Yeah, definitely cool. So now we'll switch into inspiring public engagement. Okay. And so there are close to 8 billion people on Earth and far more capital available, from the everyday investors to hedge fund portfolio managers to activists and to politicians. How do you believe everyone can get involved in motivating the capital markets for positive climate impact?
Yeah, I think it's important to know that each of you is an impact investor, if you like it or not, right? You have cash in your bank account. The numbers is huge. I think, so maybe you don't have too much in cash account, but on average, you have, say, $300 in your bank account. If you multiply that by the number of Americans, you've got like $12 trillion lying around on your cash accounts, right? If you only used 1 trillion out of that, and you leverage it like you do for wind or other project, you could finish climate change in America on your own. You don't need anybody else. That's enough, right? The global climate finance gap is something like $4 trillion, which sounds huge, but that's just 4% of GDP. When I presented that to Pope Francis, he said, what does that mean per person per year? That's something like 500 euros for European or American. He said, that's the price of a fake Gucci bag, right? It's almost nothing. It's very, very little money that we need to stop climate change. And the only reason we haven't done it yet is because we have very, very aggressive lobbies that are literally supplying so-called experts which have fake news for us all the time, right? I have met a person that told me, electric cars always break down. I said, I've been driving electric car for all I can remember driving, actually. I learned how to drive here in Providence, so it's always safer if I don't drive. And these electric cars work perfectly well. You each can get involved, was the question, by saying to your bank, please give me a green bank account, go to an ethical bank, chose your bank that they don't invest in fossil fuels. You can check your personal portfolio against the Carbon 200 Underground, which are the 200 largest companies with fossil fuel reserves, and exclude them from your portfolio, and you sign up to the global Divest Invest movement. You can ask your health insurance company, you can ask your pension fund to please not put your money in places which destroy the earth. When they did a survey in Holland on the matter, 90% of people said, I don't want my pension to be invested in things that destroy the future of my children. It's quite obvious, but unfortunately we have a principal agent problem, and most of the asset allocators only follow the trend. The trend is represented by an index. The index doesn't include, there's no impact index yet, and therefore there's a problem on that point. There's one more thing on impact I'd like you to make sure you understand. There's a global net zero asset owner alliance, which is a step up from ESG maybe. But you have to understand that impact means when you can actually change something. Under the Kyoto Protocol, the first international climate agreement, it was said that you can have joint implementation projects or clean development projects if you do something additional with your money. So if you buy a standing forest, that's nice, or a standing wind park, that's nice. You may have zero emissions, but you haven't done anything. Someone else did it. But if you afforest, if you plant trees or you plant wheat, marijuana plants, yeah, or you plant and you don't smoke them, but you use them for shirts or for cars or anything else, that is carbon capture. That's very, very powerful, and you can do all these wonderful things and have a huge impact as an individual. We, the people, will decide. We also can go vote, right? And so in Berlin, we hopefully vote on the 26th of March for climate neutral Berlin by 2030, which means we wake up in a world where, never mind where you're born tomorrow, you will have your own decentral solar, wind, or geothermal power. And in the history of humanity, as far as I can tell, there's never been a real war between two democracies. And if you don't have centralized power, but decentralized power, I think we will live in a much more peaceful world. And all of that is now at your fingertips, so there couldn't be a better time to be getting engaged and getting going.
Yeah, and it's amazing to hear you tell everyone in this room that, but studying economics, you know that a lot of the time it takes incentives, it takes nudges. What do you believe positive reinforcement is always more effective than negative consequences? How do you see we can, from an economics perspective, move this, get the ball rolling a little bit?
Yeah, so one thing that I'm surprised of, the 91 was or 93 or 2 was the first COP, right? And since then we haven't made any progress, right? And it's partially to do with the fact that apparently we don't like bad news, right? If I tell you, oh, you're bad, you're bad, you're bad, you're not going to talk to me much more. So a friend of mine called Gilad Regev has come up with a new company which he wants to change the world, which I invested in a little bit as well, and that I could share with you if you want. And the idea is that we change the rhetoric away from penalty to reward. So whatever each of us does, you actually do something. Here's a quiz question. I'm going to assume you don't take cold showers in the morning. Maybe unfair, maybe if you do take cold showers. If you take a 10-minute shower, how much less time would you have to shower to charge your mobile phone? Who knows this answer? Do you have someone who has physics background? How much time? You take a 10-minute shower in the morning. It's been a rough day. Like I took a long shower this morning, I admit. How much less do I have to take a shower to charge my mobile phone? Anybody has an idea? No? No guess? Okay.
Yeah.
2 minutes, good guess. Any other? Closer, lower, please. Okay, it's 3 seconds. So one 10-minute shower will power your mobile phone for a full year, basically, right? And we just don't know that, right? We don't understand that in Berlin, 50% of the CO2 emissions are coming from energy, from heating and so forth. We don't know that. And so this app, Cora it's called, it's a Greek goddess, will help you to understand what is your footprint, but it won't tell you afterwards, now you should feel guilty and you should buy some offsets which most likely are fake, but it'll give you a reward for the CO2 reduction you actually cause. And I would like to invite you to join the effort to build this company. There's an inspirational video we can share, but just to be clear, this is just an idea and it needs a lot of work still to make it fly, but here it is.
Yeah, so any CS majors, please help out.
Or if you know one.
Yeah.
Cora measures your footprint with the Cora app. The less CO2 you consume, the more Coras you earn. If you take the subway instead of your car, or turn down the heating, you make Coras. With your Coras, you can buy environmentally friendly products and services from selected companies for a lower price. Or gain access to experiences with your favorite celebrity. And as Cora is blockchained, every carbon-reducing action you take is digitally documented, meaning that your Cora earnings stay with you safely until you purchase whatever you think of. What about sustainable earphones or an e-bike for your daily commute, healthy grocery shopping, or to help you pay for your energy bills? Cora is the new economy to empower everyone to make an impact for themselves and the planet. Are you ready to Cora?
So I think Facebook was invented at Harvard. I hope we invent Cora at Brown today. And the idea is that they have the first, what's called an alpha and a beta version, but they need 50 testers. And if you want to, you can be one of the testers, test the app on movement. That's already developed because your iPhone or Android knows how you move. And this next step is to connect to your food bill. If you go to a Swedish supermarket, when you buy something or restaurant, I'll tell you what the CO2 footprint is. I'm sure we can do that at Brown. The next one is then your energy bills. It depends how your dorm is heated, but if it's not heated by a geothermal yet, drill a hole. It's easy to do, it's cheap, and you save money on day one. And finally on textiles. So if that's something you'd like to do, you'll be very welcome.
Thank you. I'll definitely be testing that app. I'm really excited to see it. So given we just saw the importance of rewarding people for reducing their carbon footprint and using sustainably focused goods and investments, if you could speak to me or to the people in the room, both college students and professionals, if you could give one piece of advice for what they can do to make an impact, what would you say? What role do you see us all having as we walk out of this room or as we think about these topics that you've brought up? How can we make our thoughts into impact? And how do you make your thoughts into impact?
Okay, I'm going to, actually it's quite funny, when I taught, I think that we should take our responsibility and remember that how much power you have. Each of us has got huge power, each of us can change the world, and together we can definitely change the world very easily. And I'm going to share a story that actually happened on this stage. I had taught 1,200 people how to ballroom dance. And there was this couple from Hillel house, and Orthodox Jewish couple, and they came up to me and said, Jochen, we really want to thank you because I really understood when I waltzed down Sales Hall backwards and left turning Viennese waltz high speed, that I really had to rely on my wife when I was going backwards. And we became a much stronger, equal partnership. And that was fantastic. And thank you very much for changing my life, he said to me. And next he said to me, you know, you've been amazing as a ballroom dancing teacher. You have this amazing public presence and aura. You remind me of Adolf Hitler. And I said, oh, that's very nice. I said, how do you mean that? But then I actually would like to share a story, because I am German, and we do have a former Austrian/German called Adolf Hitler. And when I was a child, I used to walk around a Black Forest lake with my grandfather. And I asked him, you know, grandfather, we learned in school about the Holocaust and about the attack on Russia, and there were 9 million Jews that were killed by the Germans. And there were 33 million Russians that were killed, and Ukrainians that were killed by the Germans. How did you, grandfather, watch this? You were an Air Force pilot, you were an officer, highly ranked. He said, you know, my son, or grandson, sorry, I didn't know, and even if I would have known, I couldn't have done anything against this horrible dictator. Okay. I went away, and a few years later we learned about a program called euthanasia in hyphens. Goebbels, the propaganda minister of Germany, had decided that he wouldn't want to see handicapped people in the streets. People who lost a leg fighting for Germany, including Jewish people fighting for Germany in World War I, or an arm. People who had dementia were put in the back of trucks and they were gassed to death. Within 6 months, all of Germany knew. Within 9 months, Germany stopped Adolf Hitler. So I asked my grandfather, it seems that when it concerned you, you were able to know and you were able to act. And the tear coming out of my grandfather's eye and the silence is what motivates me every day to say, I know what climate reality is. My enemy is not an Adolf Hitler. I laugh about them, but they're really evil, but not as dangerous. They're just greedy bastards. They're just greedy bastards. And we're not talking about the Holocaust or killing 33 million Russians. We're about all of human life, right? And yes, I should be positive, so I come back to positive mood, but this is what motivates me, right? We have the ability to act, we have the responsibility to act, and we have the power to act. We have the power, we can do it. The market forces are with us. So you're too young, of course, but as a Star Wars fan, you know, may the Force be with us. The Force is with us. The market forces are with us. There's no reason that we consume fossil fuels. There's no reason we drive combustion engine cars. The electric car is cheaper, the renewables are cheaper, and it will bring us a world as beautiful as today. Skies of blue, clouds of white. What a wonderful world. We can do it, and I learned it here at Brown, and I'm very proud to be here with you. And I'm very grateful that you want to take this direction and stop the bullshit and do serious impact investing. Don't take the fake news, take the real news. You have the brains and the power. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Just, we have a few minutes left. Does anyone have any specific questions they want to ask Jochen? I can bring this microphone around if anyone has anything. That was an incredible last note.
Hey. Sorry, I should have started with this and make a joke at the end.
Anyone? Okay.
There we go.
Yeah.
Click this.
He's asking, how do we get the Cora app?
Yep. There's a, I don't know if you can, do you have this? Does the guy have this? There's a QR code, which in theory we could throw on the screen,
Yeah,
right?
well, we can throw it on our website, and we'll send it out in an invite in the Eventbrite information after this, and can get that all to you guys.
Yep. And then otherwise, you know, just act. Yeah? Ask your financial advisor, where do you put your money? What do you do with your money? And ask Brown University, when did you divest and why did you divest so late? I came to Brown University after having been a very successful human being and decided to commit $1 million to a climate chair. Unfortunately, Brown University failed to divest from fossil fuel for the longest time, so I haven't been back to campus for the longest time. I'm very happy to be back today, thanks to Kwantu and Kim. I have great hope that, and your provost, I have great hope that Brown is now back in the front where it should be. And thank you.
Great.
Another question, sorry.
Oh,
Yeah.
I see. Somebody there.
Do you have a microphone? Oh, yeah.
Sending it
Good.
over. Yeah, we do have a panel today with a member of the Brown Endowment, so if anyone wants to challenge that question, Frameworks for Sustainable Investing will be held at 1:30 p.m.
You're very good at calling people and companies on their actions and, as you said, like calling people on their like bullshit. And I was just wondering, a lot of times the people I surround myself with tend to not do that, to keep a positive attitude and keep motivation and hope in battling the climate crisis, because sometimes it's very overwhelming with all the climate anxiety to get really depressed about the situation. So I was just wondering what advice you have for those dealing with mental health issues surrounding the climate crisis.
Yep. No, I honestly think that I have never felt better in the sense that, first of all, mental health is very serious. So I was quite depressed after 2008 financial crisis, where I'd gotten rid of all financial counterparties who were doing things called rehypothecation of my assets. And I trusted what I thought was a very reliable American institution called Citibank, who given us, I think, a 50 million loan against $1 billion in assets. And, not high leverage, not $1 billion in loan versus 50 in assets, which is what a bank does, but 50 loan against $1 billion assets. And when the crisis hit, they just ignored the contracts and said, you pay the money back now, it's due. If not, we will sell the whole assets, the $1 billion in assets for the highest bid, and someone pays more than 50 or even less than 50, it's gone. So overnight, I could have destroyed all my wealth because of someone just breaking their contract. That was very depressing, and it actually happened that the night that my second daughter was born, I was in the room giving birth, as I like to say, giving birth when these bankers called and said, I need to speak to you personally, because I asked my investors to put money back in to be able to repay the 50, so Citibank wouldn't liquidate. So I had to talk to these people in the operating room, but there's no other way. And as a result, in the end, both my daughter was happily born and we were able to raise more money to pay back Citibank. But I was still depressed because I thought, God, this life is just unfair. Why don't people honor their contracts? And then I was given the chance to either take happy pills for the rest of my life and get hooked on the pharmaceutical industry, or a friend said, try Ayurvedic medicine. Ayurvedic medicine has an old 20,000-year Indian tradition of yoga, meditation, four-handed hot oil massage and on your forehead. And that's 2 weeks of intensive medicine that helped me to get out of that depression, at least at the time. Other than that, I really think the power that we have now is amazing because people like you, anyone that chooses not to buy a fossil fuel car or that chooses not to eat beef because it is unhealthy, because full of antibiotics and it causes climate change, we have a huge impact. And I think the big corporations and governments are slowly moving. I think they're moving not fast enough, but with the market forces, I think they will, and so I'm optimistic. So I don't know if that helps you.
That's
Okay.
really helpful. Thank you.
There's another question. There? Behind you? There, yeah.
I was just gonna say, one of the biggest problems I've heard, like EVs, it's quite common to hear, is like the mines for like lithium and stuff. So what solutions or investments are the solution to that problem, I would say?
The lithium mines, you said?
Yeah, just like mines in general to like get the metals needed to produce all this technology.
Yeah. So we have a portfolio company that really, if I had a slide, I would show you that I see the green industrial revolution as being the intersection of various transitions. There's an energy transition, which I talked about a lot. There's a transport transition, a finance transition, an agricultural transition, a circular economy transition. And so what happens is wind and solar, you need batteries, right? And so the initial thinking is that to get rid of oil, gas, and coal, you have to have lots and lots of batteries. But then if you think through what is the economic model of the future, you come to the following conclusion. That's Rethink X has promoted this. There's Tony Seba from Stanford and Jamie Abib from Oxford, that in fact you only have 1 month of the year, at least in most countries, where it's cold, not much wind and not much sun, And to cover that 1 month of the year, you can buy lots of batteries, or you can just build a whole lot of more renewables because they're so cheap, right? 1 year of energy put in, 20 years of free power. So the optimal version for North America or for Northern Europe is that we have a system where in 1 month, in December or January, we have enough renewables to cover all our needs of energy. But that means the other 11 months, you have 5 times more power capacity than you actually need. So you then live in a world where electricity for heating, for driving, becomes basically free. And you don't have hardly any need for batteries because you've got so much renewables all over the place. You also have new geothermal technology. The geothermal is now not deep enough to be reachable around the world. At the moment, you have Russian roulette, 1 in 6 bullets, actual roulette, 1 in 37, and geothermal, only in 1 in 40 cases you can hit geothermal that's hot enough with a 3-kilometer standard drill depth. There's now a new technology that allows you to drill deeper by 2 kilometers with a plasma borehead. It's a contactless drill bit, washing out the mud upstairs. As you drill down, you come to something like 3 cents per kilowatt hour of base load power, while we pay 40 cents in Germany today for power. And as you take these ultra-deep geothermal down, you also produce lithium and other rare earth metals that you mentioned before. So you can take any existing coal power plant, nuclear power plant, or gas power plant and make 3 holes in the ground for, say, 20 million each. And the rest of the life of that power plant will produce steam from the ground, turn the turbine, and produce power. So the need for batteries is very much exaggerated. Also, we have a portfolio company that uses electric battery in a car and plugs it into the grid. So you use batteries that are in electric cars and provide those to the grid. The owner of the car earns 1,000 euros a year, or dollars, from making this battery available for grid stabilization, which means I can give you the key to your car for free if it's a Twizy. I drive a Twizy among others. I also drive other much heavier and environmentally unfriendly cars called Tesla, but they're fun. So the Twizy costs 5,000 euros. I give it to you for free, and I make 5,000 euros for having given you a car for free. And now you tell me, electric cars are expensive. No, they're for free, and I make 5,000 bucks off you. All you need to do is plug it into the grid, right? And the batteries you have live for another 100 years after they lived in the car in a battery storage plant. So you don't have to worry so much with lithium-ion for new batteries. You can use old car batteries for new batteries. So that's there are solutions which are out there. So lithium is findable. Yeah.
Thank you. I think due to time, that's all the questions that we can take. But once again, I really want to thank you for your time. This was an amazing keynote. We really appreciate all of your thoughts and insights.
Thank you.
Just as a reminder, there will be other panel. There'll be our high impact panel sessions will be taking place from 10:15 to 11:15. Here will be sustainable food and agriculture, and then in the Nelson there are 2 other panels. Thank you.